Not all staring at you. It's all right.
Yes, we are.
Cool. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 12th TrandformGov Talks. I'm Gavin Freegard, one of the organisers, and it's wonderful to see so many of you for this special Christmas edition. So Christmassy, I've got a glass of sparkling wine in one hand. Ho, ho, ho. I would have had a mince pie in the other, but I need the clicker. So, hands up if you've been to TrandformGov Talks before. Welcome back. Hands up if this is your first time. Excellent. Hopefully we'll convince you to keep coming back with tonight's brilliant event. We've got two great speakers for you. Before I introduce them, a quick introduction to what TrandformGov Talks is. It's a space for people who care about making government work better. All of our events consist of 2 presentations and Q&A on how to do that. So we're interested in people who are doing things differently, thinking interesting thoughts, written interesting reports, have interesting perspectives on how we could do things better. We are live streaming. Hello to everyone joining us online, and we are on the record as well. Some of these events can sometimes just be about data, digital and tech. We love that, but it's not just about that. We've also had people presenting on policy design, public engagement. We even had a brief history of the National Audit Office at one of our previous events, and it was great fun. So those are the important things, but the most important thing for those of you in the room, there's also free pizza afterwards. And we've also got mince pies and carver tonight, thanks to Linda from TPX Impact. So a huge thank you for all of that. We're always looking for people to help us out. So if you're interested in helping organise, if you'd like to speak, or if you'd like to sponsor and keep us in carver and mince pies, then you can get in touch with us on transformgovtalks@gmail.com. A big thanks to our sponsors who are currently keeping us in free pizza, Anmert's DXW, Holistic Agility, Public Digital, and TPX Impact, whose offices we are using this evening. We've had lots of events so far, including Rachel at the previous event and Katie at the previous event. I'm not going to try to name everyone on there. That would be a bad idea even before starting on the carver. But you can find lots of details, video, audio, and write-ups and slides on the TrandformGov Talks website. So how's this going to work? Well, we're going to have 2 brilliant presentations. They're going to have 25 to 30 minutes each. They'll present for a bit, and then we'll go into questions. If you're in the room, you can put your hands up to ask a question, or if you're in the room or joining us online, you can go to slido.com. The code is 2554962. We'll be finishing at around 7. For those of you in the room, there's some free pizza afterwards. And for those of you in the room or anyone watching online who wants to get down to Whitechapel quickly, we're going to be at the White Hart after we've finished here at TPX Impact. The one towards Aldgate, there is another one several miles in the opposite direction. Don't go to that one. We're going to the Aldgate one. If you would like to get on the Slido, I'm going to talk slowly for a moment while you point your cameras at the screen, at that QR code and scan it. You can, of course, also use the code 2554962. I can see a few phones out, so I'll just let you finish doing that. Great. Yeah. I should have signposted this earlier, shouldn't I? You've had the phones ready. While you've got your phones out, we've also got our next event in the diary, that's number 13. In fact, Linda from TPX Impact and Matt from MHCLG, or as we should insist on calling it, Mahoka Logo, the only way to pronounce that department, will be one set of speakers talking about public service market shaping. We haven't confirmed the venue yet. We might be back here, or we will probably be in Whitechapel somewhere. But 28th of January, you can sign up for that next event now. And I'll put that on the screen later as well. Also, our hosts tonight, TPX Impact, they've got a newsletter, lots of events coming up. So if you want to keep in touch with that, you can scan the QR code on the screen now. And again, I'll put that one up later so you won't miss it if I move on to the next slide fairly shortly. Which brings us to tonight's speakers. So first up, we're going to be hearing from Caroline Starr from the School of International Futures on governing beyond the now, why policy needs a long view and how we get there. And we'll then move on to Derek Alton, one of the founders of TrandformGov Talks and also from Civic Punks, a journey into the future of government. What does 21st century government that works for people and the planet look like? But I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to hand straight over to Caroline.
Thank you very much indeed. Round of applause already. That's great. So my name's Caroline Starr, as you've heard. I work for an organisation called School of International Futures. We're not actually a school or doing education. We run global networks and communities around the world of people who are interested in how to make the world a better and a fairer place for next generations. So you're not going to hear anything about data and tech from me tonight. It's all about people. Because it's people having ideas about the future that change the world rather than kind of lots of fancy kind of foresight reports. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. And a bit about me. So my background is I have been worked as a senior civil servant for quite a while. I was in the Cabinet Office, Department for Education, Children, Schools and Families, and it was back to education before I kind of left and got into the world of futurists. So I've got kind of practical experience of trying to make change happen from within government, know how fun it can be. Just so I know who's in the room, could you put your hand up if you're a policymaker, if you work in government or you have worked in government before? Yeah, so that's quite a few people. Maybe those who haven't got a government background, where are you from? What's your background? Are you there? Oh, from apolitical as well. So yeah, kind of working in the fringes of really kind of trying to encourage governments to work better. So I thought the first question I would just like to kind of pose you all today is how many of you have either worked on a policy or an initiative where you kind of know that the results are going to be seen maybe after that minister has left their post, or certainly kind of after the spending review period? Yes, I think this is a lot of people in this room. And then I'm going to ask a follow-up question, which is, and how many of you, knowing that, have kind of changed your ambition or the approach that you were taking to the policy to fit into that time frame? Some. I think this is, you know, a group with massive integrity then, because the challenge that I'm here to talk to you about today is, I guess, this tension with the fact that, you know, a lot of the problems that we're trying to solve in policy, a lot of the things that we're trying to change, you know, they are really long term. But actually the whole mechanisms of policy, of government, of decision making, of democracy can really squish things into a kind of a 6 month to 18-month time scale and kind of, you know, switch us towards those things where you can kind of deliver and see something within a much shorter time frame than often these programs need. So that's what I'm here to talk about today. Just to give a sense of, you know, I suppose the urgency of the agenda. I mean, this has always been a challenge and a problem if you're working in policy making, but actually it feels like it is getting more urgent because of eroding public trust in the democratic system. And this is a quote from a 2024 Liaison Committee report. It was really trying to kind of urge some change in the UK government, some longer term thinking and putting some of the mechanisms in place to get that happening. And, you know, the case for this is that, you know, this isn't just kind of, you know, business as usual challenges that we're facing now, you know, climate change, housing, AI. When we survey our global communities about, you know, which are the issues that people are facing in their countries that they care about, that really require a longer view, these are the things which are just coming up time and time again, you know, are kind of a more urgent to solve. And one of my first kind of policy briefs within what was then DCSF was child poverty. And I think this is a good example of kind of a policy area where actually, if you're only kind of doing things in the very short term, you can just end up with kind of short-termism. You know, you're focusing more on crisis than you are with prevention. And this kind of just ends up loading more and more costs onto systems as well. Which brings me on to kind of the other reason for the urgency, which is this isn't, you know, just a kind of a technocratic issue anymore. Citizens around the world are calling for change. We've got kind of younger generations in lots of countries around the world. This is a picture from some of the Gen Z protests that have been going on in Kenya. This is not the only country. Younger generations in, you know, South America, in Indonesia, in Africa are all kind of asking the question, why should we pay the costs for the decisions that you're making today and the mistakes you're making today in these decisions. So I think there's a kind of a real kind of calling for change at the moment. And the positive sign as well is it's not just citizens and younger people calling for change. We are starting to see that actually more and more global leaders are also saying, actually, our system is broken, it's not working, it's not fit for the kinds of issues that we're seeing today, and we need to do something about it. So then we kind of move on to, you know, that's the issue, that's the kind of the driver for change. There is some good news in this because, as I said, you know, there are leaders calling for change and there's starting to be real momentum around having a different approach and longer term thinking and planning in government. I'm going to ask, has anybody here heard of the Declaration on Future Generations? Well done, Derek, you've been paying attention in my previous presentations. I see this man at the back has heard as well. That's like, you know, 2 people in this room who've heard of the Declaration on Future Generations. This is actually something that I think 191 countries signed up to in 2024, including the UK government. And they came together at the Summit of the Future in New York. You know, this commits the countries to a kind of a raft of measures, including that it is, you know, national governments' responsibilities to be considering and safeguarding the interests of future generations. There's then kind of a whole list of kind of ways in which government should do that, by investing in kind of foresight capability, in putting different planning mechanisms in place, in respecting Indigenous knowledge, consulting citizens. So this was a pretty big commitment to make, but it really has kind of set a new expectation and a new norm in terms of how government should be working. And actually what we're seeing is, you know, things are already starting to change on the ground, and we're starting to see a whole range of countries implementing these measures in different ways. And actually in the run-up to that Summit of the Future, we were already working with kind of networks of early adopters who were starting to make these changes in their countries, who'd been kind of pushing for things to go further on considering the interests of next generations. So a little plug here for this lovely publication, Working for the Wellbeing of Current and Future Generations. We brought this out about a year ago, and this kind of collects the evidence from different countries around the world who are making change happen. And, you know, a few of the different mechanisms. So Wales has long been a pioneer in this area. Wales was the first country to have a Future Generations Commissioner, which then has sort of really established somebody in government who has got the responsibility for representing future generations. You know, there's a lot of legislation, scrutiny of legislation, for example. Portugal is a country which has also been quite an early adopter. Things started in civil society in Portugal. There was a lot of citizen engagement. The Gulbenkian Foundation there did a kind of a lot of work exploring, you know, what kind of country do our citizens want? And now a lot of this has been institutionalized in their government. So that's another example. We're working with Kenya quite a lot. I mentioned Kenya. There's a group of politicians in the Senate who are kind of really wanting to drive some of the institutional changes and want to really kind of connect with some of the youth leaders. And then Finland is always the kind of the poster child for futures thinking and long-term governance. They've got a committee of the future in their parliament and kind of have a national a reporter every year holding government to account. So there's lots which is going on at the moment, which is fantastic to see. And then just kind of going into a little bit more detail about, you know, this. I think we'll probably all kind of agree that there's lots of good reasons for doing this, but what does it actually look like? And when we distilled all this evidence from around the world, this kind of transformation, it actually isn't about just setting up a fancy new, you know, institution or kind of, you know, futures department who takes this forward. It really requires a whole of society approach, and you need these 3 different things going on. So just to take a few kind of examples of this, if we start with citizens, you know, some of the things that we see happening, you know, civil society organisations really kind of leading the drive, incubating ideas, by governments, you know, involving communities with national assemblies. You can also have kind of much much kind of easier to implement approaches. There are lots of innovative ways of engaging communities, envisioning exercises, and getting citizens more involved. So that's kind of one area. Also, organisations and sectors being prepared for the future, most critically government departments, civil servants. And this isn't actually just about kind of training in futures thinking. This is about embedding long-term thinking, impact assessments kind of throughout all of the decision making in government. So that's kind of that area. And then on leaders making intergenerationally fair decisions. I mean, this can be leadership at many levels, and this kind of comes down to always asking, well, what's the consequence of this particular policy going to be? Who's it going to impact? And what does that mean? So we find that you need all of these, and we're working with 7 early adopter long-term governance hubs at the moment. We're being grant funded to support these hubs in their work, and what they all find quite interestingly, even a country like Finland, which is quite far advanced, is you need all of this going on because you can't sort of rely on like one politician, or one particular mechanism. It's often the case, things shift. Maybe things are happening less in the kind of public sector. You then need the civil society really kind of driving and keeping things going. Leaders can come and go, but if you've got some of these mechanisms really embedded, then it helps them to continue for the longer term. So that's kind of what it looks like and what it takes. And then this is just like a little map to show that there's a lot going on in this space at the moment. But when we recently kind of surveyed all the people in our global networks and found out how are things going sort of 1 year on, and it won't surprise you to hear that there are some kind of signs of hope, but there are plenty of barriers as well that people are experiencing. So, things like kind of quite short-term political incentives, there are still capacity gaps, capability gaps. And whilst there's lots of, kind of initiatives, lots of pilots going on, they can be quite fragmented. So, these are all challenges that I'm sure you've kind of faced and heard about in, trying to achieve widespread implementation. But the research that we've done, I think, also shows that the change like this, it doesn't come from, as I said, the department of the future, like, the perfect institution, or it's all about the perfect law. What we've seen is that the change comes from communities around the world. It comes from communities like this, where everybody kind of agrees that something needs to happen and they're determined to do something about it. There's being part of the community, having, other people who are driving change you can talk to for support, for ideas, for tools, can make all the difference. So this is, what we've learned, I think, about what that change looks like. And if you're interested in this, I would definitely urge you to join our long-term governance network, learn from other people around the world and see what they're doing. So I'm going to stop there because I thought I want to kind of end by throwing this open to some questions and a bit of discussion. And I think with end on a positive note as well, because much as things are doom and gloom in the world, we are living through this time of actually quite unprecedented renewal. There are these signs of what works, what can make a difference, and what really can be different in government. And there are lots of people around the world, who are trying to do things. So I suppose the question that I thought we could talk about together is, we are a community of like-minded people who want to try and reform government. What can we do in this kind of moment of renewal that we find ourselves in?
Caroline, thank you very much. So we've got time for questions for Caroline and to answer her question as well. Wait for me to come with you with a tiny mic. And if you're on Slido, you can put questions on there as well. The code, if you need it, is slido.com 2554 962. This hand went up first, and then I'll come over there second.
Hi. You mentioned a few countries that are leading the way: Wales, Sweden, Portugal, and they're all relatively small in terms of population size compared to the kind of UK. In your experience, does the approach have to change once you get somewhere like the UK or a larger country where there's more population, more complex needs maybe because of that, things like that? And I'd love to hear from what you found so far.
Yeah, so I think what we've something else that we've found talking to countries of different sizes is, I mean, we set out that kind of nice, neat triangle, and like, yeah, there you go, that's how you do it. But actually, every country has a completely different implementation pathway, which can be about size, and it can partly be about context as well. And actually, we've got some quite large countries, like Brazil is one of our early pioneer hubs as well. Probably the thing which makes the most difference is having that context of, you know, having the people who, you know, are really leading it, and if you've got, you know, people within government who are leading things, as well as having strong civil society and youth engagement, that probably makes kind of as much difference to accelerating progress.
Thank you. So very convinced about the need for long-term governance, but the incentives behind why it's short-term decision-making extremely strong, right?
Yeah.
MPs, elections, the fact that they come in with basically no training, so any obligations we commit to them now, they're not going to do. How do we challenge those incentives and change them?
Well, I think it's no surprise that a lot of countries who are who are really committed to this are looking at legislative mechanisms, and actually I think it's not just, you know, countries which are looking at legislative mechanisms as well. I think there are some states in the US who are looking at this too, and the kinds of mechanisms it might be, as in Wales, having you know, a position, somebody who has a responsibility, requiring that you know, policies and legislation are assessed for the impact on future generations, you know, requiring certain mechanisms to be in place. So that is something that a lot of countries are looking at, to try and make sure that this is institutionalized and it isn't just dependent on, you know, a leader who may or may not be around forever.
Thank you. From your experience, what are the blockers? What assumptions, mindsets, artifacts are getting in the way of that shift to more futures thinking? So
I think like a lot of the challenges can be very practical. And actually this goes not just within government, but I think also with society, in civil society organizations trying to encourage this. So actually, like, siloed working is just a massive challenge, and you know, we're all guilty of it. I mean, you know, even small organizations, it can be easy to just, you know, work with the people in your department. You know, this does require working across different sectors, and so it requires kind of very active you know, efforts to building those coalitions and maintaining them. So I think that is a challenge, but one that kind of can be overcome with more sort of concerted investment. Definitely, I mean, investment itself, like, this is a big change. These mechanisms do require resources to put in place, so that can be a challenge as well. And yeah, I think some of the other challenges can just be the very kind of short-term kind of political incentives. You know, these changes take longer to put into place.
We're going to go online for the next question. This is from Anonymous. Good evening to you, Anonymous. Hi, Caroline. What are some of the best cases of long-term governance? What are the aspirations for the next couple of years?
Oh, yeah, that's a very kind of broad question. I mean, I think it's hard to talk about best cases because countries are in very different places. But you know, I guess the things which just make me smile and make me feel kind of really excited when you see that real kind of connection between, you know, government and citizens, and that kind of change and ambition. So I was in Kenya at the end of last year. There's a group of politicians who've come together in the Senate to try and drive change. And at an event they held to kind of try and plan and drive momentum, you know, they were talking about, we need to be, you know, legislating like grandparents, not like incumbents. So I think the things which give me hope, it's not necessarily the very kind of technocratic things, it's where you see that kind of absolute change in attitude and that real kind of willingness to go, actually, we need to understand things from different perspectives. Like, you know, different generations have got different needs and we need to talk about it. And dialogue is such an important kind of part of this, you know, and a really important policy intervention.
Thanks. I've got 2 more in the room and 1 more online. I'll do this one, then that one, and then the online one.
With how wide open the future is and how strong people's opinions about a good future can be, can you talk about how you kind of navigate integrating like these that can be very competing viewpoints about what a good future is?
Mm-hmm. There can be indeed, and actually, I think you know, the importance is finding the common ground. There are a number of countries who have run kind of exercises, bringing citizens together to say, right, you know, what do we want for our country in the future? People are not going to agree on absolutely everything, but you know, you can often find enough common ground that gives you something to focus on together. And then the other thing I would say is, yeah, I mean, the future is completely uncertain. You know, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. It's very turbulent as well. But in these turbulent times, it's almost like that long-term thinking and that long-term planning is even more important. So I think, you know, and having that dialogue approach is part of it. But, you know, in terms of the way you frame the questions, in terms of getting people to kind of share their different experiences. You know, I think there's more. We like to focus on the differences and the tensions, but I think sometimes there's more common grounds than we think.
There's a hand over here.
I was going to ask a similar question, which is kind of what, if anything, do you need to know about tomorrow to help support this work right now? But that's kind of similar. So perhaps just a question about how well established do you think this is as a discipline within government? I come from local government and we're trying to do an exercise to work out how mature the sector is in sort of doing this sort of work.
So actually, I will come and grab me later because I'll send you something that might be helpful. I think probably what is more mature is lots of government departments, lots of governments have got kind of either specialist foresight teams and you know, that kind of experience in running specific futures interventions. Let's do some horizon scanning. Let's think about the future of X. What is probably much less advanced is thinking about where that fits within a whole ecosystem. You know, where are leaders at? What are the decision-making processes? How is it embedded? So actually, you have to think about that whole system, or, you know, there's somebody over there doing some really cool future stuff, and it never actually, you know, influences the, you know, the decisions which are, you know, making the most impact on citizens' lives.
And we'll finish with the other upvoted online question. This is also from Anonymous. Don't know if it's a different one or the same one, who knows? Is long-term governance a rose by another name? Nation building? Statesmanship? Question mark.
Well, long-term, so I think I'll just lead by saying, you know, especially in future, people can get very hung up on, you know, different language and quite territorial. You know, I think you can use different words for this. Is it intergenerational fairness? Is it long-term governance? Is it futures thinking? Like the language, the words kind of matter less than the intended outcome.
Caroline, thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
We're now going to move on to our second speaker of the evening, and that's Derek.
Hey everyone, good to see so many familiar faces here. Thank you all for coming. Yeah, I used my organizer privilege to steal one of the speaker spots because I thought it'd be kind of fun to share a lot of what I've learned over my time in the UK since I'm moving back to Canada, or moved back to Canada, and then traveling the world with Civic Punks. So I'm basically just going to do a bunch of storytelling with 3 kind of goals. First is to provide a bit of a sort of a theory of change that hopefully will make all of this make sense. The second is to share a bit of what I've learned during my time here in the UK, and especially time at Apolitical. And then third, to share a bit about Civic Punks and this crazy thing that I'm doing next. So that's the plan. We'll see how I do. So I've been obsessed with this question of how do we make government work better for people on the planet for about 17 years. An obsession is very much a true word. It's all I think, eat, sleep, breathe, as many of you know. It's kind of funny. If you actually knew me 18 years ago, you never would have believed it, because 18 years ago, I was convinced I was going to be the next big punk rocker out there. Thankfully, most of those videos have been destroyed. Yeah, that was the vision. That was the dream. And then I went to university, and I discovered there's like this big, huge world out there. And the world's filled with all sorts of problems that I felt a deep sense of responsibility to help be part of solving. Sort of that, classic quote from Uncle Ben of, with great power comes great responsibility. I very much felt that. I'm incredibly privileged. If we're here now, all of us here are quite privileged. And with that comes a responsibility to do what we can to help make our communities, our country, the world better. Simple, right? And so then I became really fascinated with the role of government and how government, no matter what issue you care about, if you swim upstream on it, you keep bumping into this thing called government, this incredibly powerful collective lever to create change. Is the most powerful lever we have to pull on, whether it's climate change or inequality or war, whatever the issue is. Government is at the center of it. It's the cause of and solution to all of the world's great problems, to quote Homer Simpson. So simple enough. All right, we just need to fix government. Brilliant. That was the conclusion I came to in my first year at university. I'm like, all right, I'll figure this out probably by my 4th year, and then I can go back to my plan of being a big punk rocker. Obviously, that's still on hold, coming soon maybe. For me, the answer is always going to be about community. The other thing you know about me is I'm all about community. So why? So my background is Mennonite. Most people here probably have no idea what a Mennonite is. I like to describe it as Quakers who sing. Basically, it's a denomination of Christianity that's very much about community. We're famous for being barn raisers. Classic story of, when a person's barn burns down, the whole community shows up and builds a new barn. The modern day example that I experienced, because I have not been involved in any barn raising per se. Actually, it's not true, I have. But anyways, that's another story. It's moving. So when someone in my community moved, the whole entire community would show up, and it would be just complete chaos, because you don't need 60 people to move a house. But you'd have, there'd be people who'd be cooking, there'd be all the kids, someone has to take care of the kids, and then there's people who are packing, and then there's people who are moving things. There's always about 4 or 5 people who are determined to be the ones to carry out the cast iron stove that every house seems to have and needs to be moved for some reason. And then you just had a whole bunch of people standing around waiting for their turn. Like, that's what I grew up with knowing and understanding. That's how you do things. You do things through community, including changing the world, right? So that classic Margaret Mead quote, never doubt what a small group of people can do to change the world, because it's the only thing that ever has. But I want to sort of add on that, because it's not just about community. You change the world through a network of communities, a community of communities, movements. So I've been obsessed with movements that are designed to help change government. And so that's really what I've been doing for my whole entire life, is trying to bring together communities and connect those communities to each other to create movements. And so most of my undergrad was spent, and even my graduate diploma was spent, trying to understand how you build movements. But inevitably, movements are, like, the way I look at it is, like, you can study forests all you want, but if you don't understand how trees work, you're missing something important about the ecosystem. And so as a result, I went back to school, went to university, and did a master's on, of all things, friendship. So yes, I have a master's in friendship, in case anyone's wondering. But really what it was an excuse to study behavioral economics. What are the conditions, the contexts, the habits, the rituals that help build friendship? Why? Friendship is a building block for community. Community is a building block for a social movement. If we want to change government, we're going to need a movement. Make sense? And start to see the theory of change come together and like, oh, okay, this is why Derek does everything that he does. Hopefully this makes a bit of sense. Okay, so the next part, key thing that sort of helps explain why I am the weird way I am, is when I graduated university, I decided I just wanted to go and meet cool people trying to make democracy better, because they're really cool, and I just wanted to hang out with them. So I literally just sent them emails and be like, hey, you seem really cool, can I have coffee? And amazingly, they said yes. I'm amazed at how many people have said yes to coffee for me, and many of you in this room have said yes to coffee for me. Thank you. I have no idea why you did, but I really appreciate it. And the thing that was really interesting is, first off, they were in fact super cool, which was great. The thing that surprised me, though, is they didn't seem to know each other, which confused me, because they were oftentimes in the same city, working in the same field, and yet maybe even a block apart from each other. and yet they didn't seem to really know each other. And I'm like, this is a huge missed opportunity. You're all working on the same problem together. Why are you not talking to each other? And I was wandering through a field one day, complaining about this to my friend Kev. And my mom calls me up, and she's like, hey, Derek, we have a cottage. She's like, when do you want the cottage this summer? And I'm like, I don't know, Mom, I'll get back to you. And then Kev just kind of looks at me. He's like, well, why don't you just invite these people to your cottage? I'm like, okay, right, Kev. These people who are super cool, and I'm just like, whatever, are going to come to a cottage because I invited them after having coffee with them once. Like, that's going to happen. He's like, well, at the worst case scenario, they say no, and then we just hang out at the cottage ourselves. I'm like, okay, fair enough. So we invited them, and they came, which is crazy. And it became an annual tradition, the cottage shindig on democracy, which we ran right up until the pandemic. And it was really interesting. We had basically 3 key principles to it. The first principle was, come as a human. Don't worry about your titles. As soon as you come to the cottage, your title is left at the door. So we had people who were founders, we had people who were very senior within their organizations, and we had people who were just really passionate students. It didn't matter. You were all just people passionate about making democracy better at the cottage. The second part was learn from each other. Pick the collective brain of everybody who's here. There are brilliant people here. Here's your chance to get great advice and feedback and just test out ideas. And then the third piece was think like a movement. Each of you represents different parts of the system, but together we represent the whole entire system, or at least a larger part of the system. If we start thinking of ourselves more than just people, more than just organizations, but rather as a collective pushing towards something, that's how we create change. That's how we change the world. So that became a theme for me that I'm sure some of you have experienced before, this idea that, 1, I find it confusing why people don't seem to know each other, and 2, then a desire to connect those people to each other because there's so much cool things we can do together. And it was coming out of this cottage shindig on democracy that I got my first job in government. So I've been railing against the system from the outside as an activist. And then I got invited by a friend of mine. So Justin Trudeau, might have heard of him, the dreamy prime minister. The dreamy prime minister from, yes, that's right, Katie's boyfriend, as he's now known. We're in the weirdest timeline. Anyways. He made a decision in his first election that it'd be the last first past the post election. Great. How do you do that? And so my friend's like, well, Derek, how would you create a national dialogue on electoral reform? Because we had to figure out what do we change to? And conveniently enough, I'd run national dialogues and studied national dialogues before. And also I was a huge nerd on electoral reform and knew most of the key stakeholders. So we had a lot of fun sort of jamming on this idea. And after a month of doing this, she's like, okay, great. Do you want to work on this? I'm like, well, what do you mean? She's like, well, it's my job. I'm building the team to do this. And so that's how I got pulled into the system. And then I was on the inside. And one of the things that was interesting, and I'm sure many of you who've worked in government have experienced this, is when you enter into government, the first thing you realize is this system is so weird and broken in so many bizarre ways that you don't think about on the outside. It's like stuff about how do you procure things? How do you hire people and talent? Why does it take 6 people to review and then sign off on an email that will then take you maybe 3 weeks? Why does that happen that way? It makes no sense. But the other thing I realized was that there's just this absolutely incredible group of people inside of government who are trying to create change, who've dedicated their lives. They're not doing it for the glory, because you don't get glory as a public servant. They're doing it because they believe that government can be better and that they have a responsibility to make it better. These are my people. And I basically just became a giant groupie for this group of people. And again, same kind of map in the sense of amazing people all over the place, but they don't know each other. What if we connect them together? What if we hang out at a cottage? What if we just get together over drinks and then start thinking about what can we do together? How do we build this into a movement? And I first did that within the government of Canada, just between departments. And then I did it between levels of government, and actually was able to turn into my job within the government of Canada, where I was responsible for helping draw connections between the national, provincial, and local governments and Indigenous governments in Canada. Again, we're all trying to solve the same problem. It's amazing how, no matter what your job is in government, there's someone doing exactly the same job in basically every government everywhere. So if we could just, connect to each other, so many cool things could happen from that. And it was around this time that Kit Collingwood, who some of you might know or at least know of, came to Canada to talk about this thing called One Team Gov. So One Team Gov had just kicked off in the UK, and she was talking about it in Canada, and there's a bunch of us who are like, this is so cool. We love this idea of thinking of ourselves as one team, policy, delivery, this department, that department, it doesn't matter. We're all part of the same team. And it became this umbrella. And so a whole bunch of us started organizing in Canada, and we created a OneTeamGov chapter in Canada, which is pretty cool and fun. And that was a really inspirational experience because it introduced me to really cool facilitation tools like lean coffees and unconferences, just different ways of bringing people together to get them to connect and share ideas, not just talking heads like you are experiencing right now. So that became a really interesting model for me. But the other thing is it got me thinking about, there's all these amazing people all over the place who are trying to make government work better, but they don't realize that they are amazing, for one, and two, they don't realize there are other people. They feel really isolated and lonely. So I'm like, we need to give it a name, And I've been reading a lot about this whole like cypherpunk movement to build the internet. And I'm like, you know what? Civic punks, because it combines people who are passionate about civics and government in their community with this sort of like rebellious, like challenge the status quo, punkish thing. And I think I might have been channeling my, lost dream that one day might come back to me, being a punk rocker. And so I wrote, I think it was actually just a Google Doc. Wrote a Google Doc. They're like, Civic Punks, we're gonna make it a thing. And it landed flat and no one was really interested in it. So I just kind of shelved it for a while. And then the pandemic happened. And when the pandemic happened, I think a bunch of things happened. One is that it became much harder to connect and to meet. We moved online. And I think we got tired and burnt out. And one of the things I realized is that this amazing movement of people that exists, it can't do it on its own. We can't do it through volunteers, because OneTeamGov was literally a team of volunteers. TrandformGov Talks is a group of volunteers. Like these groups, the things that is bringing this fiber together is all being done off the side of people's desks out of passion and out of belief that it's something important. That's not sustainable. That's not scalable. And I was really wrestling with this idea of like, we need a home for public servants when I reached out to Robin Scott, who's the founder of Apolitical. And I was reaching out to her about something completely different. I think it was, we were trying to organize a global unconference for OneTeamGov, and I was trying to get Apolitical involved in it. And we just started jamming on this idea. And she's like, well, I've been thinking a lot about similar ideas. What would it look like if Apolitical became a bit of a watering hole for the movement of public servants? I'm like, interesting. That would be pretty cool. Do you think Apolitical would be willing to put some resources behind that? And she's like, yes, I do think that. Would you want to help us figure out how to do this? I'm like, really? Like a job? She's like, yes, like a job. And so I picked up shop, flew out to Canada and joined Apolitical. And that was, I think, right around the same time you joined, Katie. So it's late spring, summer of 2022, I think, somewhere around there. And we started just trying to figure out this question of how do we build space for public servants. And the first thing, and Dave, you and I have had lots of conversations about this, community building 101, go to where the community's at, right? Don't build something new, go to where the community is. Problem, there isn't a single place where the community is. It's scattered over all sorts of different platforms. Twitter was starting to have it sort of wobble, so it was causing people to really migrate away from there, which was a huge loss for the community. But it's not just that. The other thing is, right around this time, a lot of governments are starting to really push back against working out loud. After sort of the heydays of the early, GDS, when there's write and blog and work out loud, this was sort of a bit of a pushback. And so public servants were more nervous to be sharing themselves so openly in social spaces. Some were still being loud and obnoxious like myself, but most were not. And so we needed to find a way to create a new space that was safe for public servants, that was easy for people to find. So you didn't need to know the right people. You could just find it because you're curious. And so we started experimenting with this. And our first experiment was something called Q&A. Do you remember Q&A on Apolitical? It was our first sort of foray into creating a more social space. The other thing that we had at Apolitical is we already had a platform that had 250,000 public servants engaging with it regularly. So we figured we could build off of that early momentum and create this Q&A. The challenge was people were asking really good questions that were really hard for us to answer. And so we had to scramble to build people, we had like a list of key thinkers that we knew that we had primed ahead of time, being like, we might have some questions for you, be ready. But the other thing is that people want something to be more interactive. And so, and I believe it was December of 2023, we launched our first ever community. Can anyone guess what topic the community was on? Hot topic in 2023? It just... ChatGPT had recently dropped. So AI. So the first thing we did, we realized, is to launch a community, you can't just launch a community. You need to have some fanfare around it. So we linked it with an event. So we did an event. In fact, we were already doing events. So we had to rush the community. So we did an event on AI with, I think we had like 3,000. It was one of our biggest events of all time. It was a huge event. And then we used the energy from that event to pour it into the community, to like keep the conversation going. We've got this community, let's keep talking, let's keep sharing. And AI is a field that people had a lot of questions about. So it's a perfect example for that to work. And so we really quickly got several hundred into, I think we were up to 1,000 within a month or two into that community, which is great. So lesson number one, events, great. The next challenge we had was, okay, but just because people are in the community doesn't mean they're going to do much. And this is where we had to bring in this whole concept of Flintstoning, right? So in the early days of Reddit, most of the activity most people are lurkers, right? That means they're just there to watch, they're just there to read things, but you need some people to contribute. And so we started Flintstoning, which meant that most of the early posts were just us at Apolitical posting things that we thought were interesting, that we thought the community might be interested in. We then went in and did some user research to be like, well, what do people want to know about? What are the questions they're asking? What are, the resources they want to see and share? And then we went out and tried to find it and fill it. So in the early days of the AI community, it was literally, I think, 3 or 4 of us that were just posting stuff and trying to pull out, feedback and engagement from some more active contributors like you, More. I think you're one of the first people to start really posting stuff there. And that became a key lesson for us with all of this. Then we started exploring partnerships. What if, instead of us just building community ourselves, what if we partnered with another organization? So the first organization I think we partnered with was the Federal Youth Network in Canada to create a community on new public servants, which has since evolved into career development. And it was great because then it wasn't just us. We had a partner who was excited, and it gave the community more credibility, and it also pulled in their networks. The challenge is it was really hard to keep them sustained over a long period of time because this was a side of desk thing for them. So even though they thought it was super cool, they got distracted with things. So we had to figure out ways to support it to make it super easy, which got us really into this whole idea of content calendars and really structuring. So the idea is, let's focus for a period of time, maybe half an hour, and create the content we need for the next 6 months. And then you can just easily just post every couple weeks. So that became a key thing that we learned to do. The other thing that we had to learn how to do was how to listen to our community. And one of the things that really caught us off guard was neurodiversity. There's right around 2024, there's this whole rise of interest in ADHD and neurodiversity within the context of government. But the problem was there was no place for that. People were talking about it, but they didn't really have a place to go to support each other and share resources and stuff like that. And so we kind of, on a whim, like, well, what if we just create a community around neurodiversity? And it just took off. It was our fastest growing community for a while because there's no other place for the community to go. And so that was a good lesson as well, is listening to the community and figuring this type of stuff out. Another key lesson we learned was the role of community management, which is something that, if you know me, I talk about all the time. Okay, great, we were Flintstoning, but you still need to have someone who's responsible to oversee and take care of the community managers. And I know a bunch of, Imran, you were part of these early conversations as well around community management, like how do we do community management well within the context of government, particularly on an online space? And it took some learning. So we did a couple different things. One is we assigned staff members from Apolitical to be sort of in charge of just keeping an eye on the community, make sure that people get quick responses, people get their questions answered, just because nothing sucks more than like posting something in the community and then crickets. That's how you lose engagement. So you had to make sure people got a reply really quickly. So you have to have people watching that. But then we also want to nurture community management more broadly. And I also used it selfishly as a chance to really grow community management in government more broadly. And so we had a community for community managers, which I was very excited about, super meta. And we met regularly and talked about how do we professionalize community management within a government context, which I thought was pretty cool. One of the harder lessons we had to learn is we had too many communities at that point and we're spread too thin. So we had to make some tough choices. We had to kill communities, and killing communities is never, I shouldn't say, we didn't kill them. What we did is we put them on hold. We basically stopped supporting them and let them kind of sit over there. But it's hard. So how do you choose which communities to keep, which ones not to keep? And so we had different metrics. Apolitical is really good with data and metrics. So we looked for communities that did not have any activity outside of the Apolitical team Flintstoning. And that there wasn't a lot of events and there just wasn't a lot of buzz around. And then we went through it. We gave them an extra couple weeks of energy to see if we could bring them back to life. And if we couldn't, we put them to the side. And that freed up resources that we could put into the communities that were left. So that was an important lesson as well. And so over the course of the last 3.5 years, we went from having no communities at all to all of a sudden having I think last time I checked, Chris, I'm not sure where our numbers are now, but we had 42 when I left, and I think about 30,000 public servants across all 42 communities with an average monthly activity rate. So that means they're going into the communities at least once a month. Of I think we're around 19%, something like that when I left. Thumbs up. Okay. Which are actually pretty good numbers. Yeah, so that's sort of the lessons I learned from my time at Apolitical. Those are some of the insights from that. So where am I going next and why? So I think one of the things I realized is I love community building. I love what we're doing at Apolitical. I started feeling this itch that I needed a couple of things happened. First off, I met all these amazing people who are like, hey, I really want you to come visit me in Japan. I really want you to come visit me in South Africa. I really want you to come visit me in Australia, Montenegro, Brazil. And I'm like, I want to go visit these people. The other thing I realized is I love community. I think online community is important. I need to spend time with people in real life. And so it just felt like it was time for me to go on my next big adventure. And there's an idea that I've been building in the back of my head for well over a decade, which is I wanted to solve a couple of things. I wanted to travel the world and just meet cool people doing cool stuff. Very simple and straightforward. I was really interested in this concept of civic punks, and I want to see if we could actually build it and help build the identity around this idea of civic punks, because they're everywhere. People don't realize they're civic punks. You guys are all civic punks. If you're here, you're a civic punk. Welcome to the community. But people are all over the place, and they don't realize they're part of something bigger. And I wanted to go and share them and welcome them into this community of people trying to change government. The other thing is I watch way too much YouTube, as I think most of us do. In fact, I know statistically most of us do. YouTube is the most watched medium in the world. More people spend more time on YouTube than all the other ones combined. It's huge. Problem, there is no nerdy gov content on YouTube. We're missing out. Like, it is the biggest market out there, and it is just crickets when it comes to government innovation. And that's huge, because the place that people are now going to spend their time to learn, to connect, is void of what I think is one of the most important topics, which is how do we make government work so we have a better society? How do we make government better so we can live better lives? That's not a conversation that's happening. In fact, the conversation on YouTube and other places where people are, like Instagram and TikTok, is really negative about government. And I'm like, okay, we need to change the channel. We need to get more people creating content. So my secret goal is that by the end of this, all of you are thinking about creating your own YouTube channels or podcasts, because we need all of you involved in this. So that takes me to Civic Punks. And sorry, I know I've been rambling, David. I'm almost out of time. But Civic Punks is my new experiment. So I'm doing it. I'm going to spend the next year traveling the world. I'm going to spend at least a month in every single continent, not more. And I'm going to be meeting with the people who are trying to create change on the ground, the civic punks of the world, to share their stories, to collect it, and to really inspire people with what they're doing. Because I'm inspired. It's super cool. The people out there are doing people in here are doing amazing stuff as well, actually. So I should be making videos of all of you guys. Think about it. Coming your way next, Alex. And that's the goal. The ultimate goal, though, is I want more people creating this content. So over the next year, I'm going to travel the world, but I'm going to be doing three key goals. One is I need to build a subscriber base around Civic Punks, which you can help with by subscribing here. If we can build a solid subscriber base around Civic Punks, it means it becomes an umbrella that other people can join and be part of as well. So we can have lots of people creating content under the Civic Punks banner that also have access to a subscriber base, because that's one of the hardest things to do, is to build that subscriber base. Number two is business models. Got to find a way to pay for this somehow. And so I'm going to be experimenting with all sorts of different business models. The goal being that, in a year from now, when Fabian decides he's finally going to create that YouTube channel / podcast that we've been talking about for a while, I will be able to share with him a bunch of business models that I've tested that work, as well as some that I've tested that don't work. Don't try these. That's not worth your energy. Goal number three is just the craft of storytelling in a video format. It is a craft. It is a skill set. I will be the first to admit that I'm not the best at it yet, but I'm going to try. I'm going to train really hard, and hopefully in a year from now, I'll be able to pass on ideas and expertise to really shorten the learning curve. Yeah, the final thing I'll point to here is a short survey. So one of the things that is always important when you're doing something new is to do lots and lots of user research. So this, ta-da, is a short user survey to get feedback from all of you about what you want to see. Because you guys are my community. You guys are my audience. And I would love to hear from you about what type of videos you would like to see. Oh, no. Yeah. Also, communities. Shout out to Apolitical's communities. Check them out. I got the QR code here. Yes, hit the bell. That's right, to like and subscribe. Yeah, so that's the goal for the next year, is to because we need. This is, I think, really important work. And I'm really excited. I'm terrified as well. I have no idea what I'm doing. But I mean, if not now, then when? We're going through this period of incredible transformation in terms of what government's becoming. It's a scary time, but it's also a time of huge opportunity. You know, Caroline was talking about how this is a period where we're changing. Things are changing incredibly rapidly. And so now more than ever, Civic Punks has never been more important, both in terms of the stories, but also the people in the community. Yeah, so that's my rambling set of stories. Hopefully that was interesting. Yes, questions, I think. I know we're way over time.
Derek, thank you very much. We do have a bit of time for questions. Slido.com 25 54 962. All hands up in the room, and I've seen Alex go up already, and I'll come to you next.
So question on your community management hat.
Yes.
So when we create these communities, there's always a period where they're awesome, they're amazing, we all love them, the people are great, we love the community.
Yep.
And then a lot of these communities enter a stage where they suck. And then people start leaving, and then people are still in there, are having a bad time, things like that. And
Yep.
I'm about to go off and have a conversation with people who have entered that stage and don't know what to do.
Yep.
So when a community starts losing its energy and people start saying, I'm not having fun anymore, do you have any advice for what you can do to keep the thing going a little bit longer?
I think there's a couple different things to say about that. I mean, I think a really interesting question to ask is, maybe it's time for the community to end. I mean, communities don't need to go on forever. We need to get much better at letting communities go, letting them retreat. So sometimes the answer is, it's okay. It served its purpose. It's time to let it go. If you decide that, no, I'm committed to this community, I want it to happen, I think the next thing to do is something fun. You know, something fun that ties to the purpose of the community, so people get value out of it. But it's something that's playful, that'll pull people in. I think a lot, like, why does the community exist? Usually communities exist because people have a problem they're trying to solve, and they hope the community can help them solve it. They have a skill set they need to develop, something along those lines, or they're looking for connection. And so think of something fun, playful, engaging that hits whatever the key back buckets are that at the heart of the community. Would probably what I'd do next. I'll stop there, yeah.
As you leave the UK and as someone from outside the UK, do you think there's untapped potential in terms of communities to help change sort of policy spaces?
Like in the UK, or?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I think we created TrandformGov Talks because we felt there was a gap, right? We had all this community energy coming out of UK GovCamp, but we also noticed that community energy in the UK had been waning since the pandemic. And we're particularly struggling to figure out how to get the next generation of people into these community spaces. And so I think that is as true as it was when we created TrandformGov Talks a year ago. I think that's when it was, something like that. So I mean, the short answer is absolutely. The challenge is finding ways. I think what community needs to look like is shifting as we move into a different world. And so we have to figure out, what does the policy-making community here in the UK need to look like in 2025, 26? Because it's different than it looked like in 2018, 2019. And I'll be the first to admit that I think I need to update my models of what community looks like. So
I'm going to go online for a question. This is from Bessa Rayet. How to turn resistance into engaging stakeholders, especially when you're challenging the status quo?
Oh boy. So I'm writing a book. This is a good segue into that, because I've got all the spare time now. Bessa, good question. So basically, the argument I make in the book, you should still buy it and read it when it comes out in 2035 or whenever it's going to be. Basically, the argument is this: you have to understand the resistance instead of fighting it. I would say two answers. One is to understand the resistance. Why does the resistance exist? And I think we're too quick to just assume that it's bad and fight it, and that immediately makes the resistance harder. Whereas if we can learn and listen and learn about it, we can get a better understanding of why it's there and maybe adapt our approach so that the resistance weakens as opposed to strengthens. The second thing I would say is there's an image I have in my head that whenever I think about these things, it's sort of like the tree. And so the tree is the part of whatever thing that's driving you nuts. And the instinct is to just put your energy and try to ram against the tree to knock it over. And that is going to be the hardest thing to do because the tree is in place because of a whole bunch of different roots. So part of getting to understand that resistance is to understand where that resistance is coming from. What are the roots that are holding it in place? And maybe the best use of your energy isn't to fight the resistance, but to identify some of the key roots that are holding it in place that might be more wiggly that you can create change around.
Thank you. I'm going to squeeze in one final quick question. There was a hand right here.
Just ignore the pizza behind you. There's no pizza here.
Thank you, Gavin. But Derek, can I offer you a provocation?
Please.
Our current system change is affected through the exercise of power. That's provocation number one. Provocation number two: communities will never be able to wield power because they're not able to seize power or to have enough influence to wield power. So therefore, what is the role of communities in affecting change if they can't wield power? And you're welcome to not accept that provocation.
The first provocation I'd say, power is the ability to create change. So power is always required to create change in any system. What type of power is most effective in a given system will be different. So one of the things I had to learn my government is you have different power levers when you're in government that you can pull compared to when you're outside of government. So part of it's just knowing your system and what power levers you have to play, and what types of power will have the most influence. In terms of community, I think communities are actually incredibly powerful. But to a point I made, I tried to highlight in some of my rambling stories, is that more powerful than a community is a movement, right? And so I think the real power, there's like I'm going to butcher it, but there's like an indigenous sort of metaphor that we talk about in Canada where like each reed by itself is weak, but when you put them together, they become strong. And that's the idea of a movement, is each reed is a different community. But when you can find a way to get communities aligned together, that's where power really comes. The challenge is it's highly unstable. Movements are incredibly unstable. So it's really trying to figure out how to deal with that unwillingness and hit the key points. Anyways, that's sort of my reflections, but good provocations. Thank you.
Well, we all look forward to following your travel.
Yeah.
Yeah, Derek. Thank you very much indeed. I've got a few parish notices, but I'm not going to keep you from the free pizza, carver, or general celebrations for too long. A few parish notices, a few other things are coming up. I run the Data Bites event series at Public Digital. Do Google that and sign up to our newsletter for details about next year. If you enjoyed this, I hope you will enjoy that. We have a few former speakers in the room tonight. And I'm also involved with Connected by Data, the data and AI public engagement community. Our next meeting is on the 14th of January. Again, Google that. I should have put QR codes up, but yeah, we've had enough of those tonight. The other thing I should have mentioned, and we'll put in the email to all of you after this event, I'm doing some mapping of the different public sector reform communities for kinship work. So trying to work out where are people like us and people like everyone watching us today, and how can we all work together? So I'll put links to that in the email after this event as well. Get your phones ready if you want to scan some final QR codes. A reminder that you can sign up for our next event on Wednesday, the 28th of January. We'll definitely have Matt and Linda on public service market shaping, and we'll have another great speaker for you as well. Do join us on the 28th of January, 2026. How on earth is it 2026? Please do join us for that event and sign up for details of future ones. Do sign up for whatever TPX Impact has got coming up. There is another QR code for you there. A huge thank you to them for hosting us tonight, and of course to all of our sponsors for making all of this possible, and for the free pizza that many of you are about to enjoy. A reminder that if you'd like to help us out, transformgovtalks@gmail.com. We're looking for people to help us organise, people to speak and speaker suggestions, and sponsors to keep us happy with free pizza. But if you really want to help us out, tell someone how much you enjoyed the speakers tonight. Share something, an insight, maybe a photograph or two as well. And do encourage them to sign up, TrandformGov.org.uk. That is also where you will find all of the records of previous events, video, audio, write-up slides, and much else besides. That's it from me. A huge thank you to all of you for joining us online, all of you for joining us in the room. A massive thank you to our speakers, and have a wonderful Christmas. See you in January. And for those of you